My name is Hannah, and the Lord set me free from depression last July. Um, I was thinking about where it started, like when did I begin being depressed? And I really pinpointed a time when I was in my teens, and the ground was really fertile for a seed of depression to be planted because I was going through a lot of life changes, and um, I lost my community that I had. I changed schools. And at the same time, my older sister had been diagnosed with cancer. So my parents were extremely distracted. So at a really integral time in my life around 13, 14, 15, all of a sudden I just didn't really have anyone to talk to. And so I started stuffing my feelings. I literally remember having this thought, my parents are so burdened by what's going on. I don't want to be a burden to them. So I started to just isolate, and I realized I couldn't really be vulnerable with anyone. And so I became hard. And it was, I think, probably when I was about 17, I was reading a psychology book, and there was a quiz like, are you depressed? And I took the quiz and I scored it up, and literally it just scored me as mildly depressed. And I remember talking to a friend later that day saying, I think I'm depressed. And I believe that it was that day that I agreed with depression, and I gave it the authority in my life. And I told it, you have a place here, you can stay. And I probably never thought about it again. I didn't really think that, obviously I didn't know that I had done that. But for the next 20 years, I suffered under this spirit of depression. And what I've come to learn in the last year is that it was a demonic presence that I had invited to shape my reality. And so what that looked like for the next 20 years, and in that 20 years, I became born again, and I dug into my relationship with the Lord, but I still had this spirit of depression on me. And I would say, if I needed to describe what it felt like, because it was a very functional depression, it was not like locking myself in a room with, in a dark room with the shades drawn. It was this underlying feeling all the time that something is wrong. And a lot of escapism, trying to just avoid feelings, avoid emotions. I think that the only emotion that I ever really expressed was anger at the time. So there was kind of this constant frustration bubbling under the surface. And really, it was just a bend towards the negative for 20 years. And I think at its worst, and I think it really came to a head just in the last 10 years when I started having a lot of children, and I had a lot of pregnancies and postpartum phases. And it was just so much to carry that I started kind of, I wouldn't say that they were suicidal thoughts or tendencies, but I would often say to my husband, I hate it here. I don't want to be here anymore. And in that time, I stopped reading my Bible. I stopped praying, and I would just escape. So when Jeff would come home from work, I would go lock myself in my room and I'd watch TV. And I literally, like all day, just could not wait to get to my room just to watch TV, because I just wanted to escape my reality. And multiple times I would sit there and I would be almost about to turn the TV on, and I would hear the voice of the Lord say, just be with me. And I would say no. I would reject the advances of the Lord, and I just felt like it was too hard. Like it was going to be too much work to read my Bible or to pray. Like I was believing the lie that I had to work to be close to the Lord. And, through this whole time, most of this time, I believed in supernatural healing. And I was prayed for many times, and I prayed for myself. My husband prayed for me. And the fact that I still felt this oppression over me just added to that frustration that I was experiencing. And then a few years back, we started coming to Freedom Church. And that's when I really started learning about authority that God has given us. Because before then, I really thought you had to go to some special person and get prayer and deliverance. And I didn't have anybody like that in my life. And so I just, that was it. But then I started learning that the Lord has given this inheritance to all of his children. And so I was trying to apply what I was learning about authority, but looking back, I realized that I was trying to turn it into a formula. I was reading all kinds of books and I was really digging in, but I was hoping that, okay, pray this prayer, get this healing, get this deliverance. And luckily in that time period, I prayed very consistently. I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. And I'm glad I prayed that, because I realize now that I was what James 1:8 says. I was a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways, because I would say, I believe that I'm healed, but I would also think, I believe that the Lord has abandoned me in this, that he doesn't actually care, and that healing is not for me. So I was double-minded entirely. But I kept pursuing healing because I wanted it, especially because it had gotten as bad as it had. And so I think the major turning point for me was when I started talking with God again. And I started taking my heart to him more. And not exactly sure what changed that made me do that. I think it was that I finally accepted his invitation to just be with me. And I had actually prayed at some point, like, I'm sick of the escapism, like, Lord, take away this desire for escape, this desire for television. And like, looking back months later, I was like, oh, I don't even want to watch TV anymore. Like, I had asked him for that and he had given it to me. And so I started talking with him more, and I started laying my heart before him more. And right now, one of my favorite verses is Hebrews 4:12. It says that that the word of God, is the discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart, and everything is laid bare before him. And I think that was really what started to shift for me in my mind, was I don't have to put on airs with the Lord. I don't have to try to make excuses for why I am the way I am. I can just tell him how I feel. And little by little, I started repairing my intimacy with God just by being present with him. And then last July 4th, I was writing in this journal actually, and I asked the Lord some questions, and he responded, and I wrote it down. And one of the questions was, Lord, why is this so hard for me? Because I felt like this healing was out of my reach for some reason, and I wasn't experiencing a touch from the Lord, which is what I really desperately wanted. And his answer was, because you were living under the shadow of a world I have defeated. And then I asked, what can I do about it? And he said, you don't have to do anything. Just walk in truth and don't believe the lies that say you aren't whole. And then I asked him, do you love me? And he said, I love you with an everlasting love that no man or spirit can quench. And I think it was in that exchange that I started really believing that God loved me, and I stopped believing that he had abandoned me. And it was about a week later when I went to church on a Sunday morning, and I just had this expectation that the Lord was going to move. And we were in the worship service. It had just started, and I had this inclination to worship on my knees, which is not something I've ever done. And so I get on my knees with my hands in the air, and I'm just worshiping the Lord. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like there were no barriers between us, because I had shifted my thinking. It wasn't that he had come closer. It wasn't that, it wasn't that there were any barriers there. It was that I had shifted my thinking and realized that he wasn't asking me to do anything. I didn't have a problem to solve. I just needed to look at the Lord, that I had put my eyes on the wrong thing. And so in that time, I felt that I was being ministered by angels. I felt that I was surrounded by angels at the time, and that they were comforting me and ministering to me and probably bandaging wounds that I didn't even know I had. And there was this distinct moment about halfway through worship when the atmosphere shifted for me, and I know that the person of Jesus walked in the room, and he knelt down beside me, and he touched me on my shoulder, and this weight just dropped off of me. And I just started weeping, and all I could say was, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And my hands were in the air and my head was down. And for the rest of worship, I just said his name over and over and over again. And I just felt washed in his love. And when the worship ended, I went to like get myself up, and there was literally a puddle of tears on the ground in front of me. And I just felt this new peace that I had not felt before ever in my adult life. And I just I was just at peace. Like, I didn't feel like I had to do anything. I didn't feel like I had to figure it out. I just enjoyed it. And then it wasn't until a couple days later that it hit me. And I remember saying to Jeff, I don't think I'm depressed anymore. Like, it literally took me a couple days to put two and two together that that's what had fallen off of me. And I had stopped agreeing with it. You know, and it wasn't that I had to rebuke this demon that had been following me around for 20 years. I didn't have to say a prayer to make it go away. I just had to put my eyes on the Lord. And so even now, my encouragement, what I would like to leave with anyone who is struggling with any kind of mental anguish is don't seek healing. Seek the heart of the Father, because where the light of God's love shines, like when you open your heart and you let the light of God's love shine into those messy, dark places, the darkness has to go. It can't stay. So seek his heart.